Trauma and the comfort zone that feeds that trauma are the worst things that can happen to a person. The movie Blue Valentine gave me this perspective, but it was cause I had watched Good Will Hunting before that. Everything is a matter of perspective, and I believe perspectives are shaped not only by class, but also by hierarchy. Therefore, when something evaluated from a lower level perspective is compared to a higher level perspective, an absurd situation will arise, like vibing to underground rap in a place where MF Doom is underground.
Have you heard of Arathon, though he's go with me?
Or like in the Scary Movie 2, where Shorty holds a piece of paper and gives Cindy a lecture of freestyle dancing that results in an Asian girl getting punched in the face and robbed, and now that Asian girl feels justified in her radical thoughts she had with her far-right friend group, while these two not caring, because they didn't do it intentionally, continue to have fun. It's a thrill movie from the perspective of that Asian girl. Or it's like being Matt Damon acting in Good Will Hunting. Will, a genius, is unable to leave his comfort zone despite his potential due to past traumas and fears of attachment, and works as a janitor at one of the most prestigious schools. Of course, there's no shame in the work he does as a janitor. It's a job, and a necessary one at that, but he could be a janitor anywhere if he wanted to. Why specifically this prestigious school? Is there something about being a janitor there that elevates him, makes him cooler than the other janitors? We can't believe someone like Will would be motivated by that. Maybe they pay well. Nope, that's not it either. Will liked being a janitor there because being a janitor gave him the anonymity that provided a sense of security within his comfort zone. This meant that when he wrote mathematical theorems on the blackboard, no one would force him out of his comfort zone because no one saw him. But it's a movie, after all, and the professor saw him. The professor saw in him the person he wanted to be, but Will himself did not want to be that person. Indeed, he had chosen to waste away as a construction worker simply because he did not want to leave his comfort zone, despite having the opportunity to work for a company that would make him rich and pave the way for a respectable life. Even when he was persuaded to leave his comfort zone, it wasn't the advice he listened to that guided him, but the irrationality he turned his nose up at, love. It was a comforting outcome because it was an ending that didn't make either side feel humiliated. The best use of your potential doesn't have to be pursuing the most prestigious path. You shouldn't feel bad if you can't or don't want to do that, because it's not what you want. There's also the fact that you could be an 18-year-old janitor, and since you're still early in your life, this is growth for you in every way. But if you're still there at 50, then you're wasting your potential to the full. Until a year ago, I was working at Popeyes, and if I were still working there now, I wouldn't be able to make this video. Even if I wrote the script, it wouldn't be realistic because my body, exhausted from overtime, wouldn't be able to bring my words to life while preparing a video giving advice to use your potential. I'll talk some experience now. Whatever job I was unqualified for, employees were divided into 3 groups. Part-time student workers who have zero attachment to the workplace because they have their goals classified will be out of there in 5 months max. The young people searching for their identity who have a slight attachment to the job will not easily leave this workplace because they have a sensitivity attached to having a title, even though the title at the workplace means nothing in terms of prestige and even creates a disadvantage, or because they are attached to their comfort zones, as exemplified in the film. If they leave, it will be an experience that nourishes their youth, but if they don't leave, those identityless young people will become the same as my coworkers in their 30s and 40s, and these people have very few options. I know there's a term called late bloomer, but if we don't encourage people to become Walter Whites, the reality of life will force you to be a minimum wage worker at Popeyes at 40 if you've lived an unskilled life. The reality of these jobs is that fearing to quit is as ridiculous as fearing a comedy film, because by the time you reach 40, these are the places that will accept you without question. The only places, to be fair. Jobs that require no potential. You're not missing out this opportunity for 40 years from now on. If this isn't a problem for you, I'm sure you watched this movie from beginning to end with a smile on your face and admiration for Will. Good for you. But going back to what I said at the beginning, I wanted to offer a perspective on Matt, who plays Will, not Will himself. Matt is a prestigious actor who has used his potential and is completely unrelated to Will. In fact, if Matt had encountered someone like Will in real life, the possibility of Will being that person would have had a horror movie effect on him, because potentially, Will's attachment to his trauma is a terrifying situation. I think the movie Blue Valentine is a sequel to Good Will Hunting, semantically, but it's also a movie that can never be as tragic because Will isn't the main character. Let me explain. Dean is a man who never finished his education, and, like Will, leads an active vagrant life on the streets. He is extremely emotional, romantic, and has no great expectations from life. His comfort zone is enough for him. However, Dean, like Will, is a person with high potential and has a talent he does not prioritize. He takes no steps to pursue this talent. While working at a nursing home, he meets Cindy, and we see a love story unfold that leads to marriage. Cindy is a career-driven, dreamer woman, and Dean is the perfect match to accompany her on this path because he is mature and secure enough not to judge her for having a child that isn't his, and to care for the child like a father. And most importantly, he is supportive. But this isn't enough for Cindy, and while it's easier to relate to Dean's emotionality, I can also see the exhausting side of this relationship from Cindy's perspective. You see, Dean's biggest mistake was showing Cindy how capable he is, and as a result, she blamed herself for Dean's lack of progress in this direction, and she also felt that Dean was falling short of the ideal she had planned for herself, causing him to lose value in her eyes. Furthermore, Dean's influence had gone beyond and become control. Dean had begun making decisions for her, directing her life, and for a dreamer like Cindy, this was a downward spiral. But despite all this, the only reason presented to make the audience want Cindy to break up with Dean is the discomfort created by the fact that Cindy doesn't really love Dean from the beginning to the end of the film, that she is distant. The audience understands that this film will not tell us a love story because there is no atmosphere like La La Land or Before Sunrise. It's one-sided, clearly. Going back to Good Will Hunting, this is the scenario that scares Will, but Skylar might not think this way about him, because when Will voices this fear, Skylar denies it. However, the source of Will's insecurity is not whether Skylar wants him or not, but Will himself. He does not see himself as worthy of reaping the fruits of his mathematical genius, let alone this relationship. He is not at peace with himself. Dean, on the other hand, is at peace with himself. Yes, he has a talent, but the reason he hasn't directed that talent is not insecurity. On the contrary, it is a realistic attitude, willingly embracing a lifestyle where his talent does not shape his life and surroundings, and being ready to set his life on a straight path, finding his direction and purpose thanks to Cindy, the object of his desire. There is generalization in Will's mind as a response to past traumas, and this generalization expands beyond the people responsible for the events when the bad things he feared happen, to the point where he can label himself as the victim and everyone around him as the abuser. He lies to Skylar about having 12 siblings because his 3 siblings cannot fill the void in his life. He is attached to them at the expense of his own genius, but also distant due to his traumas. He presents himself as a rebel, even a bully, but deep down, this is his greatest fear. To overcome this fear, he creates this archetype within himself and takes refuge in the confidence that he possesses this power. This shield defines his comfort zone as every place where he does not confront his sensitive self, and it is not possible to leave this comfort zone where his way of thinking is fed by trauma. He's overcoming his victim mentality thanks to Robin Williams. I can relate. But his trauma is still strong, and since we don't see what happens next, this is just a theory. But breaking down your defenses after someone tells you you're not to blame isn't a sign of strength. It's pent-up emotions overflowing. Now that Will is free, if he can't leave the love he has now designated as his comfort zone in a moment of possible heartbreak, vulnerable as he is, it will cause him more pain than Dean suffered, because Dean's peace with himself allowed him to move on with his life, a confidence that Will lacks. And it's tragic because he deserves it right. He's one of a kind. And after this heartbreak, it's highly likely that he will take refuge in the ego of his genius. And because he will sabotage this, he will live a life similar to that of gifted kids who grow up and lead a loser lifestyle without achieving anything. Or he and Skylar will live happily ever after together, free from their traumas, with a peaceful life filled with happy memories. But you know, the actors themselves tried that and didn't work though, so
I don't know.
I wanted to present the negative perspective because after watching this film, when I rewatched Blue Valentine, it didn't seem tragic to me at all. The greatest affliction that can befall a person is trauma, and its consequence is a lack of self-confidence. From the moment they establish a comfort zone as a defense mechanism, the person adopts this trauma as a shield, and events will most likely unfold from the perspective I've presented.